Round 6 of the Formula 1 this weekend was at the Spanish Grand Prix. Now, this is a race that's typically known for quite boring races, and it is a not great track for overtaking. But we saw a lot of drama. We saw quite a few overtakes from these new aero cars, and there was quite a lot of other drama coming from technical faults and a few crashes in this race. This video I'm going to go through my driver ratings and key moments of the race, so stick around. Now I'm going to go through my race rating, and I'm going to give this race a 6 out of 10. I think this race was sort of slightly above average. I really enjoyed watching it, but I think this is mainly to do with the collisions that we had and some of the technical faults we had, especially between Leclerc and Verstappen. Now, I don't think this track, I still don't think, even with the aero cars, this track's great for overtaking. There's sort of one key opportunity at the end of turn 1, but other than that, it's still not a great track. This has been better than previous years, but I still think there's room for improvement. Removing that last chicane probably would help, but I enjoyed this race more than usual, and I think a 6 out of 10 is fair. So let's quickly go through the qualifying results before we get into our driver ratings. Charles Leclerc set an amazing pole lap right at the end of qualifying after spinning on his penultimate lap. So yeah, really great lap from Charles there. That's what's going to make the difference in this driver's standing at the end of the year, putting in laps like that. Verstappen, second, he didn't go out for another lap. Sainz putting in a strong qualifying lap. Russell, sort of Hamilton, Perez finishing off that top of the field. Bottas proving he's a strong qualifier again. And Kevin Magnussen and Mick Schumacher putting both Haas's into Q3. A stronger qualifying we've seen recently from Daniel Ricardo. Lando was unlucky to get his track time deleted through track limits. Esteban Ocon, good qualifying, as well as Tsunoda and Gasly, and also from Zhou. Drivers failing it to make out of Q1, Vettel, Alonso, Stroll, Albon and Latifi. That Williams did not look great around this track this weekend. So now quickly onto the race results, and we'll work our way up from the bottom. Leclerc with a DNF with car issues. He was really unlucky, and I think he would have probably won this race, or Verstappen would have got quite close, at least. Zhou with another really unlucky. I think Zhou's been really unlucky this season. He's shown in the first couple of races that he should be in Formula 1 and he sort of deserved the place that he's got. So I really want to see Zhou sort of finish in a few races. I think he's had quite a few DNFs recently, and reliability and issues with his car. Albon apparently picking up a bit of damage. He was quite far off the pace all weekend. Kevin Magnussen finishing quite low after his collision with Hamilton. We'll get through that a bit later. Latifi looks like a strong finish, but with Magnussen crashing and Albon having car issues, it's still pretty much last, and he's a lap behind Lance Stroll. So it may look good in the standings, but I still think there's room for improvement there of Latifi. Lance Stroll, P15, not too much to note. Mick Schumacher, Gasly, Daniel Ricardo 12th, Sebastian Vettel, strong finish from Tsunoda, stand out in the points, as well as Fernando Alonso. These are the teams that are looking to pick up a lot of points from the midfield. Lando 6th this weekend, so he'll be happy with that one. Really strong drive from Esteban Ocon. Also Valtteri Bottas sitting behind the three teams in the front running. Hamilton P5 after his crash. Carlos Sainz, George Russell, Sergio Perez and Max Verstappen. So moving on to the driver ratings, and this rating is for how I think the driver performed across the whole weekend. It's not just for the race, it's for qualifying and also practice as well, as this affects sort of their whole weekend package. Obviously the race is going to be weighted the highest in how I rate the drivers. Now I actually changed my rating on this. I was going to give Leclerc a 7, but I actually don't think he put a foot wrong, so I'm going to give him a 9 out of 10. I don't think Verstappen probably would have caught him this weekend if he finished the race, but yeah, without this car issue, he didn't really put a foot wrong, and he put an amazing qualifying lap. I think he was almost 3 tenths up on Verstappen. Now, Sainz's season's really sort of surprised me. He was really good last season against Leclerc, and he was so consistent, and he was just always there to sort of pick up as much as possible. But I think this season, I don't know if the pressure's getting to him, or he thinks he can push that a little bit harder to win the title, whereas last year he was sort of in the midfield, there wasn't as much to push for. But yeah, he seems to be struggling still a little bit. I'm going to give him a 5 out of 10. He obviously went off, which cost him a lot of time. He still managed to finish the race in 4th, which if you finish between 1st and 4th, that's sort of where you're expected, having either the 1st or 2nd best car between them and Red Bull. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he performs now that the Mercedes are in that fight for 1st place. Max Verstappen continues the record that he wins every race this season that he finishes, and to be honest, it looks like that way. I was watching this race and I was thinking it's a matter of time before Verstappen's going to win this race. Even if Leclerc was in that, I think he probably would have got him towards the end, and I'm going to give him a 9 out of 10. For Verstappen, he doesn't need to qualify on pole. Even when he's if he qualifies 3rd or 4th, I still expect him to finish the race, and I don't really have any doubts that he'll be able to do this. So this is another brilliant drive from Verstappen, and at this moment in time, I think he is the best driver on the grid quite comfortably. Moving on to Checo, and at one stage it looked like he was going to win the Spanish Grand Prix, but after team orders from Red Bull, Verstappen came through to get the win. And to be honest, I think Verstappen would have always got the win, but it would have been nice to see these drivers fight. But yeah, P2, solid result, 8 out of 10. I think Red Bull will be happy with this. Now, I completely understand with this team orders, considering how much it went down to last year within the last race. If you can get Verstappen a 7-point advantage for swapping these two drivers over, that's absolutely huge in the title. So yeah, I think this is going to be a no-brainer from Red Bull. Now on to the Mercedes drivers, and it looks like they're back. Hamilton with a 5th place after crashing on the opening lap with Magnussen and having to pit due to a puncture. He said over the radio, guys, I think it's probably best if we just save the engine, it's not worth the wear, we're not going to get anything. So managing to get back into P5 is a great result for him. I think if he didn't have that collision, he probably would have been on the podium, and I think he could have got ahead of Russell. He was really unfortunate. Now with the collision with Kevin Magnussen, I think Magnussen is completely at fault for this. Hamilton was on the inside and he didn't turn out on him, he didn't try to push him off. Kevin Magnussen looked like he was coming round, tried to take a tighter line than he probably should have, and yeah, there was a slight collision, and it's definitely a racing incident. I don't think there's any penalties required, but yeah, unlucky for Hamilton, and I think that collision with Kevin Magnussen was almost all to blame with Magnussen. George Russell had a really strong weekend, another podium after his first for Mercedes in Australia. I'm going to give him a 8 out of 10. I think Hamilton had probably more pace across the weekend, but obviously Russell didn't have the incident, so he was up there and fighting for the majority of this race, and he had some really great moves with Verstappen, defended him multiple times on the straight. One point Verstappen came through, but he held the outside and managed to get past Verstappen, which was great racing from Russell. It's nice to see him pulling off some of these moves, and it shows what a great driver he is, and I think he's going to be a future world champion. Lando will be happy with his performance this weekend. He was extremely sick, he couldn't even talk on the radio at the end of the race. He just had to click a button to his engineer to confirm he was okay. He was extremely unlucky on his qualifying lap with track limits. Lost that time and then got out and didn't make it through to Q3. But overall, I think 8 out of 10 for Lando, considering his circumstances. I think normally he'd be sort of slightly disappointed with this performance, but I think if he was on top of his if he was feeling great, he probably would have qualified much better. But yeah, 8th is a good result, and considering he probably thought he probably wouldn't even take part in this race, I think he'd be happy to pick up any amount of points. Now onto the other McLaren driver, and Daniel Ricardo. Made it through to Q3 just, and finished the result in 12th. Now, I think this is a turning point for Ricardo. I think this is a stage where you've got to ask the question. He's been underperforming with McLaren for over a year now, really. And Barcelona is one of those tracks where the drivers know it so well. It was a dry weekend, there was no excuses, and he was just off the pace. Lando wasn't feeling great, and he still beat him in the race by 4 places after qualifying behind him. So I think McLaren have a big question to ask with Daniel Ricardo. With the amount of young drivers that are coming through, they've currently got Piastri as their reserve driver, although I don't think Alpine will want him driving for McLaren potentially. It will be interesting to see where he ends up next year. I think for the race, I'm going to give him a 3 out of 10. Now, this might be harsh because he's only finishing 12th. It's not like he's finishing at the back of the grid, but I think it's clear now that there's no excuses for all of this race. There was nothing that happened. There's no big crashes, and he's really been sort of underperforming all season. Obviously, he qualified slightly higher. He qualified faster than Lando this race, but that was due to track limits. And without that, Lando would have beat him 6 qualifying sessions to 0 on pace. And I've seen a few people say that, yeah, but he can't suit to this car. It's not set up right for him. And I still think this is a reason that McLaren should get rid of Ricardo, because great drivers can adapt to new cars. And although some people have a preferred driving style, I think if he's not matching Lando's performance at the end of this year, I think they're going to have to get rid of him. Because when he was brought in, he was seen to be the number 1 driver. He's a proven race winner, and they sort of see him as a role model for Lando to follow. But ever since he's come in, Lando's pretty much wiped the floor with him. So yeah, I think Daniel Ricciardo is really going to have to turn this season around. Otherwise, I can't see him racing for McLaren next year, and I also can't really see many teams taking him. He's getting sort of the end of his career, and I think a Williams or other teams sort of towards the bottom, there's other drivers that they probably would prefer to choose at this stage. Not a great qualifying session for Alonso in 17th, but the race pace of this Alpine is quite impressive, and this was a great weekend for Alpine, picking up a lot of points in the midfield. He finished the race in 9th, just behind Ocon, but yeah, solid drive from Alonso, and I'm going to give him a 6 out of 10, probably slightly above average. Now moving on to Ocon, qualifying 12th and finishing the race 7th, I'm going to give him an 8 out of 10. I think this could even be a sort of an 8.5. I don't think it's a 9 for 7th place, but this is an extremely strong position, and Ocon's been delivering good points for Alpine all season, and he's probably up there with a few other drivers for my driver of the season so far. I think he's really outperforming Alonso so far. I think Alonso's had a bit more raw pace, but in terms of just being there for the points when you need it, and this is exactly what Alpine need for a midfield team, he's been the perfect driver. I think if you're a McLaren, would you look at Ocon next season? Maybe, maybe not. But yeah, I think he has been an extremely strong driver and probably the most overlooked driver this season. Another great weekend for Bottas, great qualifying in 7th, and yeah, gaining a place to finish the race in 6th place. I'm going to give Bottas an 8 out of 10. Really strong weekend for him in that Alfa Romeo. I think he's over-delivering this car as well, and I think he's another one of these drivers that could be considered so far for sort of driver of the season. It'd be interesting to see if Zhou finished a few more races where they would compare. But yeah, Bottas has been brilliant this season. Zhou, unfortunately with another DNF, he's been extremely unlucky. The first couple of races he way overperformed what I was expecting of him. And yeah, recently it's not even like he's been underperforming, he's just been so unlucky with car issues. So yeah, I'm going to give him 5 out of 10. There wasn't really anything he could do. Probably quite an average qualifying, but yeah, I want to see him finishing some more races because I feel like he was impressive at the start of the season, and yeah, he's got to be extremely frustrated with the car at the moment. Kevin Magnussen putting in a good qualifying lap with 8th place, but yeah, finishing the race in 17th after a collision with Hamilton on the opening lap, which I think was his fault, so therefore I'm giving him a 3 out of 10. He seems to think on his socials that it wasn't his fault at all and Hamilton turned in on him, but yeah, I don't think this is the case. I think he was just a bit too eager to come around that corner, and yeah, he probably could have given Hamilton a bit more room. But yeah, 3 out of 10 for K-Mag. Good qualifying, strong qualifying from both Hasses, and I think this is something that they will maximise in Monaco next weekend. They both seem to be quite strong at qualifying. They have the raw pace, it's just the race pace that seems to drop off a bit. Most races they're starting in the front 10 places of the grid, but then yeah, it's sort of dropping off throughout the race. So in Monaco it'll be interesting to see if they can hang on to these positions. Now, Mick Schumacher at this stage, it just feels like he is never going to be getting any points. Qualified 10th, finishing the race in 14th. There wasn't much coverage of Mick. I didn't see sort of much of him going on during the race. I think a 5 out of 10. I think it's a pretty standard race for the Haas. A lot of the points I made with Kevin Magnussen sort of stand with Mick. I think they'll look to maximise their qualifying pace next weekend. But yeah, this could potentially be a good place for Mick to pick up some points, but he's showing more consistency towards the top end of the midfield, or the sort of bottom half of the midfield. He's sort of getting closer to 10th on a lot of weekends, which is a good sign. But yeah, I still think he needs to pick up these finishes a bit higher before Haas will be happy. But yeah, long season to go, so we'll see. Another driver with a bit of a nothing sort of weekend was Gasly. Qualified 14th, which for Gasly is actually quite low. He was putting that car in P3 and P4 last year. So yeah, seeing him 14th in qualifying's a bit of a shock, and yeah, finished the race in 13th. So I think it's a slightly below average, a 4 out of 10. I'm not too sure what's happening with Gasly. He seems like, well, I think the car, to be honest, is just, it's not great. It's not as good as it was last year. I thought there would be a team that potentially were going to pick up on last year and be at the front of the midfield, but it doesn't seem this way. And yeah, not a great weekend from Gasly, and a bit of an underwhelming season from him so far. Now, at the end of last season, I thought Tsunoda, there's probably no way he's going to be in Formula 1 at the end of this season. But the way he's performing, he's outperforming Gasly in quite a lot of races. Qualifying 13th, just getting into the points, I'm going to give him a 7 out of 10. I think everything that they wanted from Tsunoda last year, he has improved on. He seems to be not making as many errors. He can just sit there and collect some points every now and then, even though this car's not great. So yeah, I think AlphaTauri will be extremely happy with Tsunoda's performances, especially compared to where Gasly is performing at the moment, as he is an extremely talented driver and a good benchmark. Moving on to the worst team this weekend, and this was Williams. Albon qualified 19th and finished the race in 18th place, apparently picking up some floor damage, although this wasn't covered, so it's just rumoured. But yeah, a bit of a nothing weekend from Albon. Obviously the red hair didn't work this weekend. 4 out of 10. He's obviously not going to be picking up points every weekend, but I think if he's thereabouts most weekend, then Williams will be pretty happy with his performance, and he's definitely outperforming this car this season so far. So, a fair bit to talk about with Latifi this weekend. Obviously, the new rule with a rookie taking place in FP1 for each team for one session this season. Williams chose to do this at Spain, and they chose Nick de Vries, who is the Formula E and Formula 2 world champion, to take this place. And yeah, he finished FP1 rather a 10th quicker than Latifi, which probably people are looking into more than they should. You don't know what fuel loads they're running, but all I've got to say is if I was Latifi, I'd be putting in a quick lap no matter what, just to show that this driver that's never touched a car in a race this season isn't going to be outperforming me. But yeah, that wasn't the case. So I'm going to give him a 5 out of 10 for his finish. 16th place is pretty impressive for Latifi, but yeah, with Albon behind him with damage and Mick Schumacher, Kevin Magnussen behind him with a puncture from the crash, this is sort of last place really. The drivers behind him weren't really that strong. With all the rumours and gossip around Aston Martin this weekend, with their copy of the Red Bull design, it's actually quite a quiet race for them. Qualified 16th, neither driver had a strong qualifying session. I think a few people were expecting them to put on pole or something. But yeah, finishing the race in 11th. Probably this is sort of fairly strong result for Aston Martin, to be honest. I'm going to give him a 6 out of 10 for Vettel. But yeah, there's still room to grow, and it'll be interesting to see how this Aston Martin develops. Obviously this new car is extremely different, and they probably did a lot of testing in the 3 practice sessions. So yeah, keeping an eye on the Aston to see sort of how they develop this car further. Lance Stroll, I'm going to give him a 5 out of 10. Qualified 18th, finished race 15th. To be honest, it probably could be a bit low, more of a 4 out of 10. Probably under the delivered this weekend for the Aston Martin. But yeah, new car, a lot of testing going on, given the benefit of the doubt. And yeah, as again, it'll be interesting to see sort of how these two drivers pick up this car in the coming races. So let's go through my driver and loser of the day, as well as Team W and Team L. So driver of the day, Verstappen, solid drive. He had a lot of car issues with his DRS, but yeah, still stuck it comfortably in first place, and he's got to be favourite for the World Championship at this stage of the season. Now there's quite a few drivers that probably could have been in this loser of the day, but I think it's got to be Daniel Ricardo. He's not getting close to a teammate whatsoever, and at a track like Barcelona where it's not the easiest to overtake, he was just getting passed down the straight multiple times. And yeah, I don't think he's got it. I don't think this team's probably right for him. And yeah, it's a shame to see, because there's no other driver I'd want to see being up at the front of the grid than Danny Rick, and I hope he can turn around this season. But yeah, there's something that's off, and yeah, I think after this weekend it's sort of well, for me anyway, there's been a shift in how he's perceived. He got a lot of benefit of the doubt last season, and now it's getting close to sort of halfway through the season. We've had 6 rounds and he's still not delivering. With a new spec of car, I think McLaren need to look at their driver lineup. So moving on to Team Win, it's got to be Red Bull. Red Bull 1-2, leading the Driver Championship, leading the Constructors. Yeah, great weekend for Red Bull. They just need to make sure that their car is reliable for weekends where Ferrari and Mercedes are finishing up at the top, because they want to make sure this car can finish every race with how close this season is going to be likely. And Team L, it's got to be Ferrari. Charles not finishing is a huge impact on the drivers' championship. Yeah, they're just hurting. This has happened to Red Bull. Max hasn't finished a couple of races through to DNFs, and it's going to happen to most drivers throughout the season. So yeah, Bad weekend for them, but they'll bounce back and they'll be up there fighting at the top. So finally, let's go through the drivers' overall standings after this race. Latifi and Mick Schumacher, the two drivers to not get points. Zhou still in 18th after another DNF. Stroll in 17th place, and above him Albon, Fernando Alonso, Sebastian Vettel and Pierre Gasly. Slightly bigger gap up to Daniel Ricciardo now and Yuki Tsunoda in 11th place, where Gasly's in 13th. I think this is showing that Tsunoda is performing really well this season, and yeah, he's made a big step up. Kevin Magnussen, after a really strong start to the season, has sort of dropped off a little bit, but I think this Haas car is going to be, it's still pretty quick, and I think they've got a few more results in the bag, and it's also worth considering they're one of the only teams to not bring any upgrades, so they're going to have this later on in the season, which might be an advantage to them. Ocon, as I mentioned earlier, I think he is one of the drivers that's gone under the radar most, and he's probably one of my drivers of the season so far. Same with Bottas, putting the Alfa Romeo in 8th is pretty impressive. Lando 7th, Hamilton is climbing now, and he's going to be happy with that Mercedes after this weekend. Carlos Sainz sitting in 5th. I think he's going to be annoyed with himself. He probably should be a lot higher after some of the mistakes he's made. George Russell doing extremely well to be in 4th place. He's been picking up a lot of P3s and P4s this season. Perez not too far off Leclerc, but yeah, I think Leclerc and Verstappen are going to be the main two drivers fighting this season. And Max Verstappen gets a 6-point lead on Charles Leclerc, which is massive, and it just shows how one race can swing things massively. So yeah, this season's definitely not over, and I think this is going to go down to the wire. And with the two Mercedes coming through now, I think it's going to be extremely interesting to see how this championship develops. We're going to have potentially 6 drivers fighting for a championship, or at least three teams fighting for the constructors, which is going to be, yeah, really great, and it'll be interesting to see those drivers fighting each other at the front. So yeah, thank you for watching to the end of the video and sticking around. If you've enjoyed this, feel free to give me a like or subscribe. It really helps the channel grow, and we've gained quite a few viewers recently, so yeah, that's great. So thanks for watching again, and I'll see you all soon.